So the subject for today is going to be insulin. And it's something that we hear a lot about, but maybe we don't know so much about how it functions in our bodies. You know, if you're not a diabetic, then maybe you haven't really had to research insulin and understand it. But we should all know about insulin because it's very, very important for many aspects of our lives. Here I point out 4: our health, our energy level, aging, and weight control. So throughout the lecture, we're going to see how insulin affects all 4 of these aspects, and how knowing more about insulin is also going to help us be healthier, have more energy, age slower, and be able to control our weight better. So let's begin with talking a little bit about food. Now, our body needs food for 2 purposes. The first one is energy. So in order to get up in the morning and walk and think and all of the things we do, we need energy. And it's very interesting because our body can use all 3 of the macronutrients, carbohydrates, fat, and protein, as a source of energy. Most people think that all the energy comes from carbohydrates, but that's not true. The thing is that our body does have a prioritizing way that it gets its energy. So if there are carbohydrates, it's the easiest way for our body to get energy. So that's what it's going to use first. Now, if we don't have any carbohydrates, if our body is completely empty of glucose, then our body starts burning fat as a source of energy. And it won't switch over to using protein as a source of energy until all the fat is pretty much gone. So there is this prioritization in the body. Carbohydrates is the easiest way to get energy, so that's what the body does first. To use fat as energy, it takes a metabolic process, it's harder, and to use protein as energy is even harder. So our body prefers not to have to do that. But if we're in an extreme situation, if you're on a desert island and you've gone 60 days without eating, your body's going to start using protein as a source of energy. So we always need energy. Without energy, if there's no glucose in our body, our brain will die. Just like if we don't have oxygen, if there isn't an energy source in our body. And the second reason we need food is for nutrition. So these 2 are very, very different. One is just to be active. The other one is to build up our body. So protein, that's the building blocks of our tissue. So our skin, our bones, our nervous system, our, every single cell requires protein. Not only for the production, but for the repair. If I cut myself when I'm cooking, and my body has to heal that, and in order to heal that, it needs protein. Number 2, fat. The body uses fat in many, many, many ways. So triglycerides, it's a word one hears every now and then, it just means fat in the blood. So just like our blood is full of oxygen, taking it to all parts of our body, our blood contains oils that are going around the body. Cholesterol, fatty acids, our organs are a high percentage fat. So our brain, for example, our liver, our kidneys have huge, huge amounts of fat. And they need that to be healthy. So we need a lot of fat, we need oils. Fiber, our body doesn't actually consume fiber. It doesn't take it in from our digestive system. Fiber just goes through our digestive system, and it keeps our digestive tract healthy and clean. So when you're eating, say, broccoli, and you're chewing on it, all of that fibrous stuff, that's not going to go into your body. What you're getting from the broccoli is all of the liquid that's in it, all of the minerals, the vitamins. That's what your digestive system absorbs. But all of the fiber just goes through and surfaces that rough material, keeps your digestive system clean. We need vitamins and minerals. These are key components in the chemistry, all of the processes going on in the body, all of the hormones, burning energy, creating new cells, all of those things require vitamins and minerals. So that's what keeps the body in balance. And then phytochemicals, they protect the body against what we call free radicals or oxidation. So as we're going about our day, some of the cells will become, say, corrupt or spoiled. And so these phytochemicals, they trap onto things that are bad and they take it out of the body. So they're very, very important. So this is why we eat. Number one, to have energy for our daily activity. And number two, to keep our body healthy in all of these different ways. So now that we've understood food, let's take a very specific look at the energy process. So we're going to discard all of the building blocks of the body and keeping it healthy. We're just going to take a look at the energy that our body gets from food. So the process of glucose and insulin in our system. Now glucose basically just means sugar in our body. And carbohydrates, our body basically sees it as sugar. We see a slice of white bread, our body sees a spoonful of sugar. We see a bagel, our body sees a spoonful of sugar. We see a baked good, or a bowl of Cheerios, or pasta, our body sees a spoonful of sugar. A potato. All of these carbohydrates basically are just sugar. They turn into glucose in our body. Even fruits. Fruit has a lot of wonderful nutrition, but the sweeter the fruit, the more the sugar, which doesn't mean it's bad. Our body needs energy. So we need to get rid of this concept that, carbohydrates are bad, that, sweet things are bad. Our body needs glucose, but we need to understand how much and how we should consume it to be healthy. So, in our blood, there are between 80 and 100 milligrams per deciliter. So if you took a deciliter of blood and you measured how much glucose is in there, it would be between 80 and 100 milligrams. And throughout the day, the amount of glucose is going to vary. Why? Because we eat, and we're putting into the blood more sugar, more glucose. So throughout the night, our level of glucose has probably stabilized quite well. So it's a flat line, and then you get up in the morning, and then you eat at 8 in the morning. And it takes a little while for the digestive system to process it, but eventually all of that sugar, let's say you had a bowl of cornflakes with banana and a glass of orange juice. The cornflakes are carbohydrates, sugar. The orange juice comes from fruit, orange, lots of sugar. So basically you're getting two types of carbohydrates there. So the sugar is going to go into the blood, it raises the blood level, the glucose level in the blood, and then the body, to respond to that higher level of sugar in your blood, releases insulin. And we're going to understand the process of insulin a little bit more. So let's say that our insulin level was also, because there's always insulin in the blood, just like there's always sugar in the blood. Let's say our insulin level is around the same. As the sugar level goes up, the insulin level also goes up. So the pancreas is keeping track of how much sugar is in the blood, and as soon as it notices it starts going up, it starts producing insulin and releasing it into the blood. So these two are tied together very, very much. insulin and glucose. So as glucose goes up, insulin goes up. And what happens when there's more insulin in our blood? Well, one of the functions of insulin is to allow the cells in the body to grab the sugar from the blood. So it's like a bridge or a transporter. So sugar is going by, the cell can't do anything. All of a sudden a little bit of insulin comes by, and with that insulin, it can grab the sugar and use it for energy. So insulin is necessary for cells to get the sugar from the blood. So that makes a lot of sense. The more sugar there is in the blood, the more glucose there is in the blood, the more insulin that needs to be in the blood so that the cells can take the sugar. And so as the cells are taking sugar from the blood, it goes down, and then it normalizes. Somewhere between 80 and 100 is all normal. And then what happens? At 12, we eat again, and so the blood sugar goes up higher. It goes up higher probably because we have a bigger lunch. Maybe we have a sandwich with some turkey and some cheese. Along with the sandwich, we maybe have a bag of potato chips, and that cupcake looks so good, so we get a cupcake for after the lunch. We're having 3 types of carbohydrates: bread, pure carbohydrates; potato chips, pure carbohydrates; and then a baked good, a muffin or cupcake, carbohydrates. So we're putting a lot of sugar into our blood, and so it raises again, and that means that insulin is also released into the blood. So there's more insulin, and as there's more insulin, then it starts going down, and we have energy for the whole afternoon. And then about 6 o'clock we eat again, and so the sugar enters the blood. Maybe for dinner we have a bowl of fruits. So the sugar from the fruits goes into the blood, and the insulin also rises, and since there's more insulin, then that gets rid of the sugar in the blood, and eventually it stabilizes as we sleep. So this is the normal process of both glucose, or sugar in the blood, and insulin in the blood. So every day, it's going through this kind of wave. Now this is more like what our current situation is. Most people, because we are not really living so healthy, have a raised level of sugar in our blood. It's not at 80, it's maybe at 90, or maybe at 100. Some people at 120. So it depends. But let's say that it's a little bit raised, because we consume a lot of sugar, and so instead of raising a little bit to 100, we don't have a bowl of cereal, we have a Pop-Tart. And instead of having fresh squeezed orange juice, we have concentrate, orange juice from concentrates, which means that it has more sugar. So we're giving the blood a lot of sugar. Instead of it raising to 100 and having a slight variation, we're raising it to 140 milligrams of sugar. And so what does that mean to the pancreas? The pancreas has to produce a lot more insulin because there's a lot more sugar. So our pancreas is having to work extra hard to produce a lot of insulin so that our blood sugar can go down. Now what happens is if we have an excess amount of sugar and thus an excess amount of insulin, our body goes a little overboard, and so instead of going down to 80, it actually drops below 80. And that's a problem, because our brain cannot use fat as a source of energy or protein as a source of energy. It has to have glucose. All of the other cells in the body can use any type of energy source, but not our brain. Our brain has to have glucose. So as it dips under 80, the brain starts getting a little worried and says, if this downward pattern continues, I'm going to die. The brain knows that. If there's no glucose, the brain is going to die. And so it starts panicking. And what does it do when it starts panicking? It makes you moody. You get tired. You feel hungry. You get sugar cravings. You get a headache. This is the way the brain responds to us having low levels of sugar in our blood. It's not good for our system. It's a state of emergency that the brain is reacting to. So maybe at around 11:30 you're getting a little moody, somebody calls on your phone and you slam the phone down, not because you're an unkind person, but because you are in a state of emergency. You're in a bad mood, you're hungry, you can't wait until 12 o'clock lunch. 12 o'clock rolls around, you're starving. You're not hungry, you're starving. And so instead of getting the sandwich that you got yesterday, you get a sandwich and you think, I'll throw in a slice of pizza. Pizza is pure carbohydrates also. And that muffin that was so good yesterday, today looks doubly good. So you have a lot more sugar, and what happens? All of that sugar goes straight into the blood, and it spikes, and that makes the pancreas have to produce a lot of insulin, and so there's way too much insulin all of a sudden, and what happens? The blood sugar gets dispersed from the blood, and we go even further below 80. What does the brain do to respond? Panic. Again, we get moody, we get hungry, we're craving sugar. So we go get some coffee and a brownie, because at the employee lounge there's always baked goods and coffee. So we get some coffee, and again, we get this jump of sugar in our blood, and our pancreas works like crazy to produce insulin. And what happens? It dips down again. And since it wasn't so high, it doesn't dip down as bad. And then we eat dinner, and the same thing happens. So this image is a pretty healthy cycle of eating. This is the way our body wants to have it. This is the way we're treating our body with the typical Western diet. And why? Because we're eating so many carbohydrates. Sugar, in all forms, in healthy forms and processed forms, is prevalent in our diet. And so we're giving our body this constant roller coaster of sugar and insulin. Now, why does diabetes happen? Diabetes is basically somebody's pancreas who says, I give up. I throw in the towel, I'm done. So the body no longer produces insulin. And so what happens to the blood sugar levels? It goes crazy. And so you have to take insulin pills or insulin shots to compensate. Otherwise, the body wouldn't be able to manage. You would die. But this is what we're putting our body through every single day. Now there's another step that it comes before diabetes, which is, an extreme case, and it's called insulin resistance. So our bodies, our cells, to be able to get glucose from the blood, need insulin. So when insulin comes along, it uses it to grab the glucose. But if there's so much insulin all the time, our bodies start becoming resistant to it and can't use it effectively. And so these spikes here that happen start becoming more drastic, because in order for our cells to get energy, we have to flood our blood with glucose for the cells to be able to get energy. And the cells are resistant to the insulin that's also flooding into the bloodstream, and so these things start just becoming more and more and more extreme. So it's not unusual for a normal, healthy American to have insulin above 100. So there's two types of tests that they do to measure your insulin. One is a fasting test. We've all had it where the doctor says you have to come in without eating breakfast. So So basically what they want is for you to go 12 hours without eating food. So you have dinner at 6 or 8 at night, and then you don't have breakfast, and then you go take the test. So that's called a fasting insulin test. Because they want to get this level. They want to know, where is your body normally? It's not unusual for people's fasting insulin levels to be 110 or 140 or 200 or 300. That's where people are at a baseline. Where should we be? Between 80 and 100. If we're really healthy, probably 80 is where we start off in life as children, when we're healthy and we haven't abused our system. And then the other insulin test is after about an hour or two after you've eaten. They want to see, where are these spikes happening? So there's the fasting test, and then there's the 2 hours after you've eaten test. Those are the two levels they want to understand, to see where your insulin levels are. Okay, so now we've understood the process of glucose, basically sugar in the blood, and insulin, and how that works in the system. So insulin resistance, this third chart that we saw, is a condition in which the body does not efficiently use insulin. So the pancreas is having to produce a lot of excessive insulin for the body to respond. It's estimated that 75% of Americans have it. We're 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people here. 7 of us probably have insulin resistance. That's the truth in today's America. So what is the function of insulin? And we already touched on this a little bit, but it aids the absorption of energy to the cells. So the cells can't get the energy from the blood without insulin. So it aids in that. It regulates blood sugar levels, because when it spikes, then the insulin helps bring it down. But also it has this third function. It triggers the storage of glucose as fat. And this is where it's really, really good for us to have this information, because we can understand how the body produces fat, why it produces fat. Sometimes we gain weight and we don't understand it. We think, but I'm eating healthy, I'm having the things that my doctor said I should have, and still we gain weight. Well, this will give us a lot more insight. If the body has too much glucose, about 2 hours after it's eaten, if there's still too much glucose in the blood, the insulin basically triggers the body and says, okay, we need to get rid of this sugar. The cells haven't taken it up. Let's turn it into fat. And so that's the third function of insulin. It decides when the levels of glucose are too high in the blood, it turns into fat. So we're getting fat not because we're eating a lot of fat. We're getting fat because we have too much sugar in our blood. And the insulin is giving the instruction to turn it into fat. So if you have insulin resistance, your pancreas has to produce a lot more insulin for these processes to occur. And that's why it's called insulin resistance, because your pancreas is having to produce a lot more just for those basic 3 things to happen. So if you have insulin resistance and eat a meal high in carbohydrates, your pancreas has to produce up to 5 times the normal amount of insulin that it would produce if you were just healthy. If you have insulin resistance, you're making your pancreas work 5 times harder than it needs to. And that's every single meal. That's a lot of abuse that we're putting our bodies through. Why? Because we like cereal, and we like white bread, and we like pasta and pizza and all of those things. But we have to understand what we're doing to our system. So we're going to take a little moment and introduce ourselves to the people sitting next to us so that we all meet and discuss this question. Is fat bad for us? are low-fat and fat-free choices always the better option? So you go to the store and there's two drinks. There's one that's low-fat and there's one that's regular. Which one should we choose?
Regular.
You go and you have the yolk, you go to the counter and there's milk and there's yogurt and you're going to buy both. Should you have the regular milk or the low-fat or the fat-free? Same thing with the yogurt. Should you have the regular, the low-fat, or the fat-free? So the question is, are low-fat and fat-free choices always the better option?
No.
Is fat bad for us? So let's go ahead and discuss it.
Okay.
So the question was, is fat bad for us? And the very simple answer is, we need fat. We need carbohydrates, we need fat, we need protein. So are low-fat and fat-free choices always the better option? That's a little harder question because it's not black and white. So, but let's take a look at what an example. So these are some common diet misconceptions. I need to count my calories to lose weight. Sure, calorie counting is important, and there is a very, very clear equation that if you consume more calories than you use, you're going to gain weight. That's true. But this idea of counting calories is not a science, because you look it up in a book and it says this apple is 70 calories. That's an estimate. That's somebody in some lab with their apple. But your apple could be bigger or smaller or sweeter. So your apple could have more calories or less calories than that book tells us. So when you're estimating how many calories were in your meal, it's kind of a guess. You know, they say this meal has 750 calories. That meal, when they tested it in the lab, had 750 calories. But the chef today was feeling extra generous on the butter. So this meal, which you think has 750 calories, actually has 950 calories. So that's why this counting calories isn't the perfect solution for losing weight. It's good. Knowledge is power. The more we know, the better off we are. But it's not the solution. Eating low-fat or fat-free to lose weight, that's another common misconception. And one of the things that we were talking about here is that the media is pumping us with this idea. Low fat, low fat, low fat. Coke zero, Coke zero. Why? Because it has 0 calories. Well, it has 0 calories, but it's got a lot of other stuff that maybe isn't so good for us. So this eat low fat or fat free to lose weight is not necessarily correct. Eat sugar free to lose weight. So the same thing, like, okay, I'm not going to eat chocolate because it's got sugar, but I found this place that has sugar-free chocolate, and so I'm going to gorge with it because it has no calories. That's wrong. It's not that easy. Or give up foods you love to lose weight. People think that dieting needs to be like whipping ourselves on the back and suffering to lose weight. Losing weight and the word diet is associated with a non-happy life where everybody else is eating cupcakes and you're sitting in the corner twiddling your thumbs thinking, I'm on a diet. Maybe tomorrow I can have a cupcake. So these are misconceptions. These are not fact. That is what they're sometimes teaching us. They want to make us feel like it's easy. So follow one of these rules and your troubles are gone. It's not that easy. So we're going to take a look at the yogurts and cereal example. And this is where understanding insulin and how sugar goes into the blood is very, very good. So there's something called a balanced meal. And the balanced meal also is very confusing. The American Agriculture Department puts out a chart of what a balanced meal, you're taught in school what a balanced meal, the pyramid is a balanced meal. So what is a balanced meal? A balanced meal really is, you should have some carbohydrates, you should have some protein, and you should have some fat. But even those simple concepts are confused, because what is a carbohydrate? What is a protein? What is a fat? Like if we think of any product like, let's say celery. Is celery a carbohydrate? Is celery a protein? Is celery a fat? It's not so easy.
It's a carb.
It has carbs. It also has protein. How about fish? Right, it has protein, but it has fat. So it's not just a protein, and celery is not just a carbohydrate. How about something a little more complicated? How about fettuccine alfredo? Is it a carb, a fat, or a protein?
That's all of them. All three.
All three. The pasta is mostly carbohydrates. The cream is mostly fat. And then it probably, Alfredo has chicken sometimes.
The cream probably has protein as well.
The cream has protein as well. So it's a complicated thing. It's not so easy. So let's take a look at this yogurt and cereal example. You're having a bowl of cereal for breakfast. Cereal with a banana and yogurt. Now the question is, do I have low-fat yogurt, fat-free yogurt, or whole yogurt? Well, the secret is that all protein helps slow the process of sugar entering your blood. So if you're having carbohydrates, which is good, it's important, if you add to it protein, it slows down the process of sugar entering the blood, which means that we don't have those spikes. Instead, the sugar enters the blood at a slower pace. So does fat. Fat binds the sugar, and so it's not absorbed into the blood as quickly. So if you have fat, when you're having carbs, it slows the process of absorption into the blood. And so you don't have those spikes. It's a more gradual rise in the blood sugar level, which is healthier. But also fiber. Fiber slows the process of absorption of sugar into the blood. So that's why a balanced meal is very, very healthy, because you're having some carbs, but because you have all of these other things, the carbs aren't just being injected into your blood, but they're all combined together, and these other things trap the sugar in, and so they enter the bloodstream at a much slower pace. So if you're having yogurt and cereal, cereal is a carb. If you have fat-free yogurt, is the sugar going to enter your blood faster or slower than if you have whole yogurt?
Faster.
Faster, because there's no fat to trap the sugar so that the entrance into the bloodstream is more constant and slower. So you would think, yogurt with cereal, it's better to have the fat-free or the low-fat. And the answer is no. It's better to have the whole-fat yogurt with the carb, because it's going to make the process of sugar entering the blood more gradual, and we're not going to have those spikes. So that's the concept of a balanced meal. You should never have just carbs, and that's what we do all the time. If you have pizza, you're having a lot of carbs, some fat, and very, very little protein. So the fat in the cheese is slowing down the process a little bit, but it's so minimal compared to the amount of carbs that you have that you do get those spikes. If you're tired in the afternoon and you open up some chips, the chips are deep fried, so there is a little bit of fat in there, but it's mostly carbs. So there's not enough protein or fat to slow the process of sugar entering the blood. So that's why we need to try to have balanced meals. So in this understanding insulin resistance and the process to eventually getting to diabetes, which we want to avoid, there's this other step. And people with insulin resistance produce so much excess insulin that the blood glucose levels are brought down below what is normal, that 80 line that we looked at, causing a low blood sugar condition called hypoglycemia. So when you have too little sugar in your blood, that's when your brain panics and you get moody, you feel tired, you feel hungry, you have a headache, it can make your body ache. It depends how extreme it is. But so hypoglycemia is on the other extreme. It's not too much insulin or too much sugar in the blood, it's too little. And some people have it really bad, that the blood sugar goes really, really low, and it takes a long time for the body to recover from that. And this is being produced, why? Because of an excess of insulin. So hypoglycemia is usually a precursor to diabetes. So if you have hypoglycemia, they say be careful, because this is a warning sign that diabetes is the next step to come. So we already saw this. Hypoglycemia causes tiredness, mental dullness, headaches, trembling, rapid heartbeats, anxiety, moodiness, hunger, and specifically, not just hunger, but sugar cravings. Because your brain is telling your body, do whatever is necessary to get sugar in the blood, because that's what I need to survive. And then this is what I explained earlier. The brain uses only glucose. The other cells in the body can use fats or protein as a source of energy, but the brain can't. It only uses glucose. So if there's little glucose in the bloodstream, to the brain that means a dangerous situation. So it goes into panic mode. So many of us assume that it's normal to feel drowsy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's just the way it is. If you have a job and you have to go to work about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it has to do something with the lighting being not quite right. And no, we should not be drowsy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That is not normal for our human condition. We should be like children, full of energy, jumping around. Are children tired at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Absolutely not. Who's ever tried to have a child take a nap at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? It's very, very difficult. Why? Because they're full of energy. So we turn to sweets and to coffee and to potato chips and whatever else to give us energy. So I just want to point out that even though we all get this, it's not normal. It's something caused by our diet. So another thing that we started to look on, and now we're going to talk about more, is insulin resistance encourages the body to store excessive carbohydrates as fat. So first of all, the problem is that we're putting too much sugar into the bloodstream. So that causes a lot of insulin to be produced. And after 2 hours, the insulin tells the body, okay, we haven't been able to use up all of this sugar, let's store it away. And this is actually a natural process and a healthy process, because we used to live in times of feast and famine. So before refrigerators, before 7-Eleven, in the springtime and in the summer, there was a lot of food available. And we ate berries like crazy. And we stored up a lot of fat. Why? Because come November, December, January, February, when the fields are covered in snow, fortunately not here in Miami, the earth is not producing anything that we can eat. And so we have to survive on the fat that we stored. So this process is natural. Our bodies, when we consume a lot of sugar, the insulin says, well, right now there's a lot of food, good, let's store it up, because tomorrow there's not going to be a lot of food. So that's why the body stores up this fat. It's a natural process. But now we live in endless feast. Winter never comes. 7-Eleven is open 24 hours a day. You can always get a slice of pizza and a donut anywhere you want, anytime you want. This is not the way we're meant to live. I had a class on fasting, and fasting is very healthy for the body. We were meant to sometimes eat a lot, but we were also meant to sometimes not eat a lot. And in the end, all of this balances out. But now we never have to not eat a lot, unless we decide that that's something we want to do and we think it's healthy. So that's why the system is broken. That's why what's natural to our bodies is not working correctly. Insulin resistance causes weight gain. We've already seen how that happens, obesity, but it's also associated with heart disease, with cancer, diabetes, hypertension, osteoporosis, and strokes. So these are all of the major killers here in the United States, and not only in the United States, but most Western societies. And all of this, it's not only insulin, and it's not only the excess eating of carbohydrates, but it certainly is a piece of the puzzle. So understanding this can help us avoid getting all of these sicknesses. Now, the question is, do I have insulin resistance? And there's actually a test that doctors have come up with to give you a pretty good notion. The only way to really know is to do the blood tests. But they have some questions, and I think there were like 15. I took 7 of the ones I thought were maybe most interesting. Now, does your family have a history of diabetes, of being overweight, heart disease, or stroke? If so, then maybe insulin resistance is already kind of in your DNA. So you have to be a little bit more careful. There is diabetes in my family. My grandmother had diabetes on my father's side. 2 or 3 of my father's brothers and sisters have diabetes. On my mother's side, my mom has hypoglycemia. And her parents, I'm not sure. But it's clearly a problem in my family. I have to be careful. Do I frequently have cravings for sweets? Absolutely. Weight gain mostly around the waist. I have had periods in my life where I've been a little bit chubbier around the waist. Not excessively. So skin tags. A lot of people don't know what this is. Skin tags are like a little piece of skin that sticks out of your normal skin, and it looks like a tiny tag, like you have on the back of the shirt, a little tag, but very, very small, and it's usually in areas where the skin rubs a lot, so under your arms or between your legs, or if you maybe wear tight shirts, it can happen on your chest or on your back. Skin tags are a sign of possible insulin resistance. It's not the only reason they happen, but if you have a lot of skin tags, it could be an indication of that. Mood swings that go away when you eat. If you're just an angry person all the time, then it's not insulin resistance. But if you're an angry person who becomes happy when you get a cupcake, then maybe it's insulin resistance. Do you get afternoon drowsiness? Is your BMI 30 or higher? So insulin resistance is more prevalent the more overweight you are. So people who have a higher BMI, if you have 25, if you have 27, your chances of having insulin resistance are higher. If you have 30, it's even higher. If you're at 32 or 33, it's even higher. So as weight goes up, insulin resistance possibility also increases. So there are 2 key elements for controlling insulin resistance. We said that the majority of us have it. That's the reality. So what can we do to combat it? Can we get rid of it? Absolutely. People can be cured from diabetes if they change their eating habits and eat healthy for a while, and their pancreas isn't completely destroyed. Can we get rid of insulin resistance? Absolutely. But you have to make some drastic changes to your diet. You have to eat balanced meals. You have to stop shocking your body with these spikes of sugar, and thus insulin. So the 2 key elements are eat right and physical activity. Now I say physical activity and not exercise because exercise is very subjective. What one person feels is exercise, running a marathon if you're a trained athlete, another person could maybe never do. What for another person, walking up a flight of 30 steps is a lot of exercise, for somebody else is not. So exercise is a relative term. I rather say physical activity. So you have to be active. Our bodies are meant to move. We're meant to have to lean over and pick up things off the floor. We're meant to have to reach up and pull down a book from the shelf. We're meant to walk. We're meant to have to bend our knees, and all of the motion that our bodies can do, it's just better for us. We should be constantly active. So, and I'm not saying go out and run a marathon. I'm saying know your body, your limitations, what feels right. Because maybe you have a bad knee or an ankle or a bad back. You have to know your body and know what's important for you. But this eating right, it's basically about eating smaller portions, so we're not spiking the glucose and insulin in our blood, about not just eating carbohydrates. This is something I am guilty of a lot, and I'm trying to change in my life. I love to eat dessert before dinner, because my mom said I couldn't do it. So as soon as I left home, then I would eat dessert, and then I would have dinner. The reason that's bad is because I'm shocking my body with all of the sugar, and then the nutrients that I eat, it's too late for the protein or the fiber or the fat to slow that process down. So I'm giving myself spikes of glucose and spikes of insulin, which is unhealthy. That's why it's healthier to eat dessert after dinner, because your stomach is full of protein, is full of fats, is full of fiber, and so it traps the sugar and it doesn't allow that spike. The smaller the meal you eat, also the less these spikes. It's actually healthier to eat 4 or 5 small meals rather than 3 big large ones. So these are the 2 key components that if we control, we can get rid of insulin resistance. Eating right means eating moderate-sized, balanced meals. That's it. Moderate-sized, balanced meals. So we already looked at this, but why balanced meals are so important? Protein slows the absorption of sugar into the blood. Fat slows the absorption of sugar into the blood. Fiber slows the absorption of sugar into the blood. It's that simple. It's not that we shouldn't be eating carbohydrates and sweets and French fries and pizza. It's that if we only eat that in a meal, it's not a balanced meal, and so we're giving our body a spike of insulin and all of the consequences thereof. Insulin, abuse of our pancreas, fat storage, hypoglycemia, drowsiness in the afternoon, all of those things that come with it. Eating protein releases, so these are just 2 extra facts about protein and fat, just so that we increase our knowledge. Eating protein releases hormones that make us feel full. Now, protein is the only one of the macronutrients that does this. You could eat all of the potato chips in the world and maybe still not feel full. Why? Because carbohydrates doesn't trigger that hormone. Or you could gobble down gallons of olive oil and still not feel full. Why? Because fat does not release that hormone, but protein does. And that's why if we include protein in our meals, be it fish, be it garbanzo beans, be it quinoa, be it tuna, or whatever you want, chicken, beef, if you have protein, cheese, eggs, if you have protein in your meal, it triggers your brain to release a hormone that says, I feel full now. Test that someday. Have this same exact meals 2 days in a row. So you can have, say, a salad with a baked potato and have no protein whatsoever. And the next day, have that same salad and baked potato, but just throw some protein on there. And you're going to feel the difference. It's obvious. Protein makes us feel more full, so it helps us not to overeat. Fat contains twice as many calories as protein. So we need to be cautious with eating too much fat. There's no clear guideline about what the percentages should be, but a good way to think about it that seems to be pretty healthy is have twice as much protein as you have fat. So let's say we're having 7 grams of fat. How do I know that? Because I read the label. Okay, I'm having 7 grams of fat. I should be having more or less 14 grams of protein. And I should have twice as much carbohydrates as protein. So if I'm having 14 grams of protein, I should have maybe about 28 grams of carbohydrates. It's not a rule, it's not so important. If it varies, it's okay. But it's just an easy way to remember. Have twice as much protein as fat, have twice as much carbs as protein. It's just a helpful guideline. That will help you have a balanced meal. So this is interesting. Why are vegetables naturally such a health-promoting food? Well, because they have vitamins and minerals and all of those things, but also they help this process of sugar in the blood and insulin to not happen as much. They contain protein, carbohydrates, and fiber. So they have carbohydrates, which is going to feed sugar to our blood, but it has protein and it has fiber, which slows that process down. So when we're eating carrots and broccoli and spinach, it has the added benefit that the carbohydrates in that vegetable are not going to make our blood sugar spike. So in itself, it's already a healthy meal. They're balanced foods. Like we're looking for balanced meals. All vegetables are balanced foods. You can eat a vegetable on its own, and it's not going to affect your blood sugar level negatively, ever. But you can eat strawberries, and it will affect your blood sugar level negatively.